we focus on Clarence Thomas because of the revelations that Harlan Crow, a very prominent billionaire Republican contributor, friend of Clarence Thomas, bought his mother's house, renovated it, in addition to supporting Clarence Thomas in round-the-world trips without any disclosure on his disclosure firms.
Yes, in a better world, Andrea, in a serious world, that story would have prompted two things. It would have prompted soul searching among the justices about whether they are doing enough to make sure that their behavior is, as Judge Luttig, he was almost Justice Luttig, by the way, as Judge Luttig said, whether their behavior was up to the proper standards, and if not, what they needed to do about it. It also would have sparked and I know this is an imaginary world I'm talking about, a bipartisan conversation among members of the judiciary about what role they can and should play in getting there. Instead, we had this, I guess, both predictable and still quite astonishing replay of high-tech lynching, including, as Yamiche said, the actual replay of the video. At least two of the Republican senators mentioned that phrase, high-tech lynching. And this is just all so really disturbing, because I think any reasonable person reading the facts of the story involving Justice Thomas and Harlan Crow would stop and say, hey, what's going on here? Are things this just doesn't look right to take so much largesse from one person. But we're just not capable of looking at that without assigning political animus and political motivation. And look, I think that's true on both sides.
And Yamiche, the Attorney General, of course, Merrick Garland, who almost made it to the court, but he was nominated and never even got a hearing because of Republican machinations led by Mitch McConnell. Garland was asked, as a former judge on the appeals court, how does he feel about the Supreme Court having no requirements?
Well, as you know me well enough by now, I'm not going to be able to comment on that kind of a question. And as a general matter, as a federal judge, I have always believed that the judiciary should follow and be held to the highest ethical standards. That continues to be my belief.
And Yamiche, he was on the court right below the Supreme Court, sort of a launch pad where Justice Kavanaugh served, Scalia, Ginsburg, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And it was from that platform that he never even got a hearing.
It wasn't. I mean, the story of Merrick Garland is, I think, going to be one that's going to be for the history books all the time, because so many Democrats feel as though Roe would not have happened if Merrick Garland was able to get on the court, and if former President Obama, had been given a fair shot to put a Supreme Court justice on the court. That being said, you see Merrick Garland here now, of course, as the Attorney General, being very, very careful, because he does not want to weigh in on the Supreme Court debacle, if that's one way to put it, this issue that they're having now with public trust. But he also is wanting to say judges should be ethical. And I think the fact that he even went that little step further to say that continues to be my stance tells you that this is something that he is at least concerned about, or at least wants to be heard about on a day like today, where you're hearing lawmakers really question whether or not the Supreme Court could do more to hold themselves accountable. And I should say, even for people who were critical of the Supreme Court, they were saying, we can't say whether or not justices have been bought, but we can say that they should put something in writing and have an official code of ethics. And I think that's what's really interesting and important to know.
And I want to read something, Ruth, from legal scholar, Harvard professor Lawrence Tribe, in a letter to Congress. He said, it should not be intimidated by the power and prestige of the justices, whose position of privilege, as they pass final judgment on the most contentious issues of the day, from the comfort of the marble palace they occupy, ought to be its own reward. I don't know if he was one of your professors at Harvard.
He wasn't, but I know him quite well. And I think that it is true that being a justice of the Supreme Court is just the highest pinnacle that any lawyer can reach. It's also true, I think, that justices are people too, and they earn what sounds like a very cushy salary. For associate justices, it's just under $300,000. But they have advocates coming to them who earn in the millions of dollars. And I think there's a little bit of a degree of resentment that goes on there among some of the justices, and why not accept a little bit of this hospitality or these free trips or whatever. I want to say I'm a very big believer in justices making themselves available to speak to students, to speak to law associations, to speak to bar conferences and everything else. And I do not begrudge them nice summertime trips, though I wish I did get the summer off also. But I think that they need to be conscious of how it looks to outsiders, what their disclosure rules are tough enough, and to really seriously question it. And we just see no indication from outside that marble palace that that's what's going on.